Hello and welcome to another Daily Mayo. Well, it's fair to say that God does nothing for Christopher Hitchens. According to him, religion is poison. The New Testament is evil and intelligent design a myth. So it's no surprise that his latest book is called God is Not Great, The Case Against Religion. Christopher, good afternoon to you.
And to you, Sue.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Let's be absolutely clear about the title. God is not great, but in your opinion doesn't really exist either.
No. That's the problem to begin with, if you like. The godly got here first. They invented religion at a time when we didn't know anything about how the earth went around the sun. We didn't know there were germs. We didn't know the earth wasn't flat. So we're forced, in a sense, to argue on their terms and argue with religion. It oughtn't to be any more necessary to have a word to say there's no God than to say there's no tooth fairy or no Santa Claus. But as it happens, atheism is a necessary demarcation. You either think you're here because of the laws of biology or you think you're here because of a divine plan. I can tell a lot about you from which answer you give to the question.
You say you've been writing this book all your life.
Yeah.
That's presumably...
because it's the oldest argument.
Sure, but also it's an argument that you've cared greatly about. It's quite clear as what you say in your book. This has been something that you have felt to be fundamentally wrong since before your voice broke.
Yes, in fact, yeah. Sorry, I nearly squeaked there.
No, well, this is... and
yes, that's right.
This is Mrs. Jean Watts, your teacher. What was it that... I mean, so how old are you, 8 or 9 at the time?
I must have been about 9, and best my recollection will take me. Mrs. Watts was our lovely, sweet old thing, taught us nature walks, different kinds of bracken, gorse. It was in Devonshire, Dartmoor, birds, trees. But she was also our divinity teacher, scripture teacher. And one day she tried too ambitiously to fuse the two things, and she said, look, children, how good God is. He's made all the vegetation green, which is the colour most restful to our eyes. Imagine if he'd made it purple or rhubarb-coloured or orange, how clashing that would be. And I remember thinking, I was 9, I thought, that's nonsense. That must be nonsense. I knew nothing about chlorophyll or photosynthesis or any of these things. I thought, no. Surely the eyes adapt to the surroundings, not the surroundings to the eyes.
Did you put your hand up and...
I didn't say a word. No, I say in the book, I curled my little toes in their tiny ankle-strap sandals with embarrassment for poor Mrs. Watts that she should be so stupid. But no, unlike a lot of people I've since met who realised when they were young that they weren't able to believe the religious account of how we come to be here, just couldn't make themselves believe anything so stupid, that everyone thinks they're the only one at first. It's only when you grow up a bit that you find there are lots of people who can't be doing with it.
What were you brought up to believe, if anything? What was the family tradition?
No, family tradition was not oppressive at all. Both my parents had come from different religions, slightly refugees from them, I think. My father had had a very strict Baptist upbringing he wasn't going to inflict on my brother or myself, and my mother was from a Jewish background and wanted to assimilate to become English, and so there was nothing imposed in the home. In case you mean, do I have any resentment about having been pushed around? No, you might. It'd be a perfectly good question, or other people might be asking themselves. No, I haven't got any resentment of that kind. I used to enjoy my Bible study classes. I didn't even know how to complain that they were compulsory. I just liked them. Taught me a lot.
Because some people arrive at agnosticism or atheism by rejecting a faith that they did have, but it sounds though you pretty much I've
been very lucky. I've been very a la carte. I was baptised into the Church of England, neither of my parents having come from it. I think it was basically for them proof that they'd moved up into the middle class. I went to a Methodist boarding school because they thought the education was better. I was married in the Greek Orthodox Church first, and by a rabbi second time round. I could write a book just about
so you actually had quite a lot of contact with...
But the Mrs. Watts moment, to me, when I think back on it, is not the moment when I became an unbeliever. It was the moment when I realised that I couldn't believe. Different from rejecting a previously held faith. I may have believed the Christmas story at some point, as I would have believed in the tooth fairy.
You have a very interesting phrase later on in your book where you describe yourself as a Protestant atheist.
Yes.
And it did set me wondering as to whether someone who arrives at their atheism through a Protestant tradition would be different from someone who arrives at their atheism from a Hindu tradition or a Buddhist tradition or a Catholic tradition. Is there a different type of atheism?
I only know what these guys and girls look like when I meet them. And they all have a different story of how they left their family cult or their tribal religion or their national ethnic one that I couldn't tell for them. But they all come to the same conclusion for the same reasons, that we are not here because of a divine plan. The Big Bang did not take place so that you and I can be having this conversation, that it's absurd and self-centered to think this way, and that the thing is made up by people who want power in the here and now, not in the hereafter. These simple conclusions can occur to anybody. But I don't know what it's like to stop being a Hindu, for example, or to stop being a Muslim, because I cannot imagine what it's like to be one in the first place.
Yes, I'm just intrigued as to the concept of a Protestant atheist.
Well, the Protestant Revolution is, I think, an anteroom for a lot of people to unbelief, because it contains such a strong attack on Holy Mother Church and such a strong attack on priestcraft in its origins. It so much denounces the evils and the ills of religion, and then says, but what you need is a Protestant one, that you're still left with the very strong impression that something important got said in the first round.
You say in your book that you've argued long and hard with religious friends of yours.
Yes.
What do they make of this? Because you're not just saying God doesn't exist, you're kind of saying religious people are stupid, really.
No, not stupid. I'm saying, though, that there is a horrible secret behind the religious impulse. Some people may want it for comfort. Some may want it for transcendence. I don't doubt it. As long as it floats their boat and they leave me alone, I don't mind either. But the wish for there to be a heavenly dictatorship, for there to be a big brother, who's the all-powerful, unalterable dictator of all things for all time, and who can read your thoughts and convict you of thought crimes, strikes me as a horrible one, and I have to distrust anyone who wishes that there was such a regime. And all I can say is that I'm very glad there's no evidence that there is.
So your religious friends, you would, because of that, inherently distrust that section. Distrust them.
I can't.
Because they are religious people.
Let's say people always demand respect for their faith. You've noticed this happening. Why should I respect someone who makes enormous claims on no evidence? And when confronted with that fact, says, well, I don't need any evidence, I've got faith. I think extraordinary claims, such as that they know not just that there is a God, but that they know his mind, they know his instructions, they've had revealed truth from him. A claim like that demands extraordinary evidence, instead of which they say, no, how about no evidence at all, and just take me on faith? I say, why am I supposed to respect that? I don't respect it. I suspect it. And I suspect the motives of those who do it, because either they're asking for me to grovel to a skyborn, unalterable dictator, or they're asking for something much cheaper and easier, which is power in the real world, here and now, and riches, collected by the church and enforced by this fear. Well, what's to respect about that? It's just another version of the will to power.
I spent a few hours on Sunday morning with my devotions watching you on various YouTube extracts of you on television, you appearing on American television, you being shouted at by American talk show hosts, and you shouting back at...
yes.
And this argument is a visceral and angry debate right at the heart of everything in the States. Do you get the feeling coming over here that we don't do it like this? It's sort of it's your argument with America, although it's global what you're talking about, but actually this is an American argument particularly.
No, it's true, because in Britain people don't come up to you and say, hey, I'm a Unitarian or a Seventh-day Adventist or something in conversation. They just don't. I mean, they may be that, but they don't flaunt it. In America it's considered quite natural to say this because there's pluralism in religion. It's actually for a good reason, in part, because the state cannot support any one church over another, whereas here we're stuck with the fact that Her Madge is the head of a state church that happens to be withering on the vine, but nonetheless, and that her extraordinary son says he wants to flirt with Islam and be the head of all churches, the most ridiculous idea I've ever heard. You couldn't get anything as crazy as that in the United States, but what you do get instead is 3 candidates for the Republican nomination for the presidency, saying they don't believe in evolution.